All right, so good morning, folks. Thank you for coming and thank you for being here in person. For those of you here, it just creates a better room, a better atmosphere. This is the plan for today. You probably all saw that in your email, but the first half is basically your enrollment guide, and there's going to be obviously our panel time and also the presentation piece, which will be done through by Lori. The second half, you get me, so hope that's a good thing. So if the first half goes really well, I don't know. But first off, just to give you a little background about me, as one of your presenters, I work for Clifton Larson Allen. I sit on the school choice committee here, and basically I'm here just to help you. Okay, so there's a couple other things about me there if you want to read, but I do have a little bit of background on you because I was a teacher. So if I sound like a teacher today, I apologize because I spent 5 years doing it and I'm still licensed. So I guess it's an excuse. Secondly, Lori right there, that's our presenter for the first half. She works at Messmer Schools. And she also sits as a member of our choice committee. So she should be very good and very knowledgeable about the topic of enrollment. On your left, on my left here, your right, this is our panel. And these are the individuals that are on the panel. And I have to thank them personally because they took time out of their work day to come here and help and be basically an extra element of support for you. They can answer any questions and there'll be time after everything or mixed in some presentation points where they'll be answering questions or talking about different issues. Remember, this is for you. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to sign you up for anything. So what I ask of you is please ask questions. Think of what might happen. Think of what you might be debating about or thinking, oh God, this is a big problem. What's coming up? Okay. So we start out the presentation. Here we are with our enrollment audit piece. And Lori.
Okay. I'm gonna sort of wander over here. It's better over here, and you'll be able to hear me better because I talk very quietly. So if I start getting too quiet, just say, "Hey, speak up." As Ed said, at Messmer Public Schools now, I've been there for about 2.5 years. I guess almost 3 years now. And I spent 17 years as an auditor at Riley Penner Benton with these two fine folks back here. So I have both perspectives now. And part of the work that I did at the auditing firm was meeting with new schools and helping them learn how to get everything ready for the auditors because we were coming to audit them. And so I really enjoyed that work. So I really hope to be able to help you get ready for that. So we're talking about the enrollment piece of the audit. The auditors are going to come. And they're going to spend a few days with you in the fall. So that's your first experience with the auditors, really. And you'll be talking to them beforehand. They'll send you lists of what they're looking for. They might seem like as if they're in a foreign language at that point because you're not used to anything. So what you should do is talk to your auditor. They'll be happy to answer your questions. They will work with you all year. They want you to be ready when they come. They don't want to scare you. They don't want to make you feel like you're not doing anything right. They really do want to help you. So ask them questions and they'll help you throughout the year so you can be ready for them when they do come. And I can tell you, as I've heard from many new schools, and even myself who went through this 3 falls ago, the first time is the worst. So I had the perspective of being audited for the first time and I had to get everything ready. And it was a whole different perspective than actually auditing it. So I was like, this is a little bit harder than I thought it was. But now, since I've been through it, this is going to be my 3rd fall, it's a lot easier. The first year is the worst. You learn so much about how to get ready for the 2nd year. So don't be scared of it. Just get through it is all you can really do. So for the enrollment audit, really what's happening is DPI needs to certify your people count in order to ensure that you get the correct payments for the September and November voucher payments. So everything that's being done is aimed at verifying your pupil counts and making sure that all of that is in order so that you get the correct payment. If you're owed money, you'll get it, and if you owe money, you'll have to pay that. So that's everything that the auditors are doing. The next few slides just go through the steps that the auditors have to go through. So this is kind of from their perspective and what they're having to do. And they don't have a choice. These are agreed upon procedures. DPI puts them in writing in order to to complete the reports that are required for the schools, they have to perform the procedures. They don't have a choice. DPI mandates that they do it. So they're not doing anything different at any school. They're doing exactly what they are required to do.
Lori, can you speak up a little bit for the people online?
Oh, sure. Sorry. So they're going to go through a process where they get to understand what your processes at your school are. And I'm not going to read through all of these. You can read through all of these. These are all coming out of the enrollment audit guide.
Question,
Yes.
just to clarify, what's the difference between an official attendance record and original classroom records?
That is a fantastic question, and I think I'm going to let one of the auditors answer that, because I'm not actually sure of the status of it anymore.
I thought they were getting rid of the original attendance.
Louder, please.
I thought they were eliminating one of the two going forward. Is that correct, Carol?
Sorry, I've been working on the technical
I
side.
thought they were striking one of those two from the audit guide going forward for the enrollment piece. Is that correct?
One of the two.
Original or official?
Official?
Yes, that is correct. The original classroom record piece will be gone. Yeah, and so what they're willing to accept now is from your SIS system.
SIS, thank you.
Yeah, it's about time.
It's about time. That battle's been being fought for years
And that's
because,
effective this fall, this school year?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, so that's brand new. That's great. That means the records come out of your SIS system and that's it. Thank you. So yes, the new audit guide for this fall isn't out, so I'm working off of last year's audit guide, so that's why. Probably not.
So can you repeat that? So what's new this year? What's coming from the student information
official-
system?
You will not have to provide official attendance records and original classroom records.
Okay, but you'll have to track them in the student information system.
They are tracked in the student information system. Once that system became a requirement and attendance is recorded in there, your official attendance records are a report out of there, and your original classroom records are also a report out of there. So I haven't been for the last couple of years, but the auditors, before I left auditing, we were fighting that battle to say, DPI, this is the same thing. So finally made some headway.
By the way, folks, just as a one thing too, and this is something you should talk with your auditors. So a lot of us firms, all of us firms, we sit on a committee with the DPI every year, once a year in the summer. And during that period of time, we discuss changes, we push for things for you. So what you should do is when you have issues and you're like, I don't like this, or I don't like that report, I don't like how they're doing this, mention that to your auditor. Because that auditor can talk to the firm and who has probably a member sitting on that committee who can make changes. Okay? It's not like they are total control of the DPI, because DPI is kind of king. But they can try to push initiatives, and that's how some of these changes have occurred.
And even better, if you were to actually talk to DPI, so they hear it from a number of sources, you might make some headway on some of those issues faster.
Just one more question, I'm sorry.
No problem.
So additional choice pupils, what does that mean if you already have an enrollment and you have your classroom full? What does that mean?
Sometimes when you complete your count report in September or January, you go online and you complete your NOAS.
Which year are you talking about?
Every year you're going to be
But
doing
we're
this.
this is our first year.
So when you complete, the third Friday count this year is on September 21st.
All right,
When you go into OAS and you complete your count report, sometimes somebody forgets to check a box. So they forget to include a student.
so.
Yet the student is eligible for payment.
Okay, so
So
if in
you-
fact we've accounted for all of our students in the OAS on 921, we don't have to worry about
Right.
additional choice pupils for
Right.
that reporting. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay. And then the next one, it just keeps continuing with the required information from the schools for attendance. It's a long, long list. Again, DPI requirements. And more.
What is the count date? Do we have a count date for September?
September 21st this year.
I heard that, but I thought, thank you.
closer to the screen, kind of in front
Oh.
of Jason.
So the count date, by the way, just so you know, folks, it's the third Friday every year in September and the second one in January. It's just a rule of theirs always every year.
Very good.
So a helpful hint with that is don't schedule a day off that day.
We're having pizza, so everybody.
So we're now in the application review list. This list is never ending. Keep going. It's just keeps going. We'll talk about all these as we go. You can read through them. It's just kind of a point to show you how extensive the list is that the auditors are going to be asking you for. And then some of them won't apply to you, so hopefully not everything will apply to you. And then we get into the application review, and these are the things that the auditors are going to have and look at. And then the next section that they're going to be working on is if you held summer school. Did any of you hold summer school this last summer? Did you ask if anybody online held summer school so we can get an answer so later if no one held summer school we can just skip this section. And then the last step that they're going to do is obtaining a representation letter, which is basically the school signing off on a list of assertions, which basically is that you provided all the information that they asked and that you told them the truth with all the questions that they asked.
Here's one person who did summer school.
Okay, so we'll get to that later.
Is there a format for that letter?
There is a format and the auditors will actually provide it
They
for
would
you.
have that, okay.
They will give it to you and they will tell you what to do with it. It goes on your letterhead and they'll
Got it.
tell you the date to put on it. It's pretty easy. That's like the easiest thing you'll be
Yeah,
doing.
that's clarifying, thank you.
All right, so let's dig in. The first thing that the auditors are going to do is really gain an understanding of your school's processes and procedures and how you're doing everything. So they're going to come in. If you're a school that's been through this before, you're lucky enough to have an auditor who probably has it all documented and they will probably give it to you to read over. So that's what the new schools have to look forward to next year. They'll just be able to read it over and update it if there's been any changes. But for the first year, the auditors typically will sit down with you and they're going to create a very long memo that includes a lot of information about your school. And they're going to need to talk to all the people that are involved in all these different processes. So whoever's processing your applications, they're going to want to talk to them to find out all that they do. They're going to talk to the people reviewing the applications if that's a different person, which hopefully it is, because you should have a second set of eyes looking at all that documentation to make sure that it's all there as it should be. And they're going to want to talk to them and find out what their process is. They're going to want to talk to at least a couple of classroom teachers when they're testing your SIS system. They're going to need to talk to them. And they're going to need to talk to the other people using your SIS system, who are probably the ones checking to see that everything in SIS attendance has been taken and kind of verifying that your official attendance records are in place. They're going to want to talk to the person who actually prepares the count report, and then the choice administrator who signs off on the pupil count reports. And then in the fall, as a new school, they're going to be doing a fraud risk assessment. If you're a continuing school, they might have already done it in the summer, so they might not be doing it again. But if you're brand new, they should be doing it. And they're going to need to talk to at least one of each of these roles of persons in your organization. So the choice administrator, that's the person that, in the eyes of DPI, is the choice administrator. They've signed up to be that person and they sign all the reports that go to DPI. An office staff person, the accountant or bookkeeper, an IT person, teacher, and a board of director member. And they have a short list of questions that they ask each type of person.
By the way, just so you know, be prepared because some of these questions are silly and they seem silly. Like what keeps you up at night? So when they do ask you those questions, I'm pre-apologizing for the auditor, because I've had to ask those questions. And the reality is, they're set by DPI. Those are a set piece of questions. They're asked every single year, and there is no way around them because they literally say, ask these questions. Now, some of them you can use discretion, but they go through about 15 to 20 and they differ by position. But it's just trying to get an understanding. Some of them are fraud-based, some are controls-based, like who reviews this and how do you do that? And it's across the board. But like I say, they're not exciting, sorry.
But what you might want to do is just let these people know that the auditors may be asking them these questions. Sometimes they'll do it over the phone, but a lot of times they like to do it in person. So just kind of be ready that you might have to contact people and get them to come or on the phone talk to the auditors.
May I add something too? If this sounds a little vague and that sense of uncertainty, of anxiety about something you've never gone through before, and you're feeling like you have to memorize everything up here, at least in our case, our auditor ahead of the date, he communicated with us and gave me a few dates to choose from, and then we settled on a date that he was going to come in. He laid it all out, what he needed from me in emails ahead of time. So in that regard, I'm trusting you guys are that way too. Your auditor will walk you through these steps too. And told me what I needed to have out for him and told me who he wanted to talk to. And so you don't need to feel now in this atmosphere of, oh, I have to put together and I have to figure out who he's going to talk to. At least our individual gave me step by step ahead of time.
So just to support that, so just, you know, when I reference things, I perform about 15 of these a year. Okay, so 15 different schools I go to. And every single school, at least at my firm, and I assume Riley's the exact same way, we provide what's called a PBC list. And you'll get that in an email, and basically it outlines every single thing you need. And every single item you're gonna have, every single piece of your accounting system we're gonna look at. Even I will usually say I need 2 teachers, I need 1 principal. And so that is all should be somewhat arranged or lined up by you prior to them even stepping in the building. That way it's not like, oh my gosh, I need this, and oh my gosh, I need that. So that's what I would expect. And we're gonna go into that a little bit later, but these are some of the things that your auditor, if they don't do that, you should be on the phone saying, where is that? Okay, because you don't be like, yes, sir.
PBC.
Provided by client.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's a technical.
I understand, yeah. Now I know.
I totally get it. I have a fiance who's a nurse and she says things and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
So yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier, is the list of items needed. Okay. Trying to avoid the PBC.
No, that's good.
So let's see. So if your school had pay for outreach, the auditors are going to ask you about that. So that means if you're providing 87.5 hours of outreach and reporting them on a K4 with the 437 hours plus 87.5 hours of outreach in order to get 0.6 of an FTE payment for them versus 0.5. The auditors are going to ask to look at the plan that you have in place to reach that 87.5 hours this upcoming year. And they're going to look at what you have on the list to make sure that it meets the requirements of what's allowed for that. So that when spring comes and they audit, when they do the financial audit, or when you do the January audit, is that when you look at that?
We look at them, you do it both, you gotta see the plan
And then, yeah, but you check it to see that they fulfill the 87.5 hours with the January enrollment audit. Yeah. So when they do the January enrollment in the spring, they'll look at what you did to make sure that you actually fulfilled the 87.5 hours. But by looking at it in the fall, they're able to tell you if what you're going to plan to do meets the criteria for DPI. And if it doesn't, they can help you because you'll be able to rearrange what you're doing. Yes.
Question, do most people, Lori, in your experience, do most schools utilize the K4 outreach or not? Ed?
So I would say that a lot of schools are very nervous about this program to start. And what I have found is this is an outstanding way to do 2 things: bring some extra dollars into your school for this service. Secondly, it seems to me that most of because this is for K only, these are things that actually promote your school and drive membership, because it's actually involving the parents and the child's education at home. So I would strongly, if you haven't signed up this year, in the future, look into this, because it's doing things like nightly reading with your child, going over different learning things with your child, having activities at the school on set dates where you come in with your child and go over things. It has to be outside of school, which is why it's outreach, but it is an outstanding way to do two things. One, to get that kid involved with their parent, which is always a great thing. And secondly, bring a little extra money into your school.
The one thing I would add to that is if like reading with your kids at home, this standard says like the parent has to return something to the school, signing it saying how long they spent with their child. So just make sure that gets done and tracked to meet the 87.5 hours. That's something that sometimes gets overlooked by schools doing it the first year.
Do you have an idea of how many schools you work with actually take advantage of that? Or is it just?
It's less than half.
So
So
is there
less
a
than half.
list somewhere?
There is a
of, like,
bulletin.
approved.
There's a bulletin. I don't know if you guys printed the website citations that I
There is a bulletin
sent.
on the DPI site that is specifically for K-4 outreach, and it's very, very thorough, very
Yes.
helpful. You can
read it and you
And
can
it covers
probably write
accepted
your plan
activities.
off of it, yes.
It does a great job.
Very thorough. It's in the school information section in the bulletins, program bulletins.
So I think the key that I just wanted you all as new schools to know is that you do not have to do this.
And if you choose to do it, it's kind of an onerous burden till you get used to it. So just be aware of that. No. Okay, so then the auditors will be looking at your attendance requirements. They're gonna look at your official attendance records. They're not gonna look at your original classroom records anymore, hurrah. They're gonna look at a school calendar just to make sure that you held school on the count date, which this year, as we said, is September 21st. They're gonna look for the Milwaukee and Racine programs. They're gonna audit your waiting list applications in the fall. For the state program, there is no waiting lists, or there's waiting lists.
The state controls it.
So there's nothing you can do. And for the special needs voucher program,
There's a waiting list also.
okay. But those don't get audited at this point. They get audited later. So the reason they audit them now is because if they're acceptable applications and that family doesn't get into the program this year, it stays with them and they've had an application with income documentation that rolls to the next year. So it pays to have your waiting list applications in order as well, yes.
So on that note, Lori, maybe speak to the fact that as school administrators, if you have parents that have made your waiting list, you might want to encourage them to stay on the waiting list and not remove themselves if they think they have interest in the future. Because if they remove themselves from that, then they would no longer be considered a continuing student for income purposes in the following year.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So does everybody understand?
Is that applicable for the statewide program, not Racine and Milwaukee?
That is applicable for all the programs. So once you remove yourself from a waiting list, then you would be treated like a brand new application, a new family the following year in any of the programs. And so you're going to have to prove your income, which could potentially be a problem.
Carla's got a good point
But-
too.
If I can add, a parent who's on the waiting list, and if a seat does come up available, and you offer that seat to the parent and they say, no, I'm going here, they're off the waiting list. So then they are removed, and they would have to. But I mean, they'd be in another school, but should they, you know what I mean? So they are off the waiting.
Because you're going to the
But
next
they're
one.
in a choice
Correct.
school,
They
is what
are-
you're saying, so they'll be
correct.
continuing the following year.
Correct, they,
Okay.
yeah, they don't have a choice to stay on.
Right.
Carla, could you repeat that again? Because I'm not sure I totally understood the flow
I
of
mean,
that.
if you have a waiting list and you have a seat becomes available and you offer it to that parent and they decline, they're off your waiting list.
So as soon as the parent declines, they're
They're
gone.
on our waiting list.
But then, as she said,
But
hopefully
as I
they're
said,
at
they
another
accepted a
choice
seat at
school.
another choice
The reason they're declining is because they have a seat elsewhere, so then they still are continuing with their enrollment.
But they could go to MPS
That's true.
and then come back in, they'd be new. So. Or a change.
Just, just to support that too, when that is declined, you're gonna check them out, because you're gonna keep there'll be two waiting lists that really exist. There'll be the school's waiting list, the internal one, and there'll be one kept at the DPI. What the auditor will do when we come in, we're gonna be verifying that those match and why they don't. So if there's a child that's on the DPI waiting list and not on yours, we're gonna be like, why? And that's where you're gonna support, we know that kid went to here.
And we have had an incident where we were I think our last audit, we mistakenly had a kid on ours that we did not check them in DPI's list, and so we made a mistake, a legitimate mistake, but we did get a little, we get dinged or whatever you want to
Right, and
call
what
it.
the auditor will do is remove them in through the reports.
Yes.
That's how they do it. They put them on two different schedules to remove them and explain why. The big thing that to take out of this is not that, oh my gosh, there's a wait list or not.
Yeah.
It just tells you, make sure you're tracking the kids at your school. Yeah. Any kids that are on your waiting list, make sure you know what happens to them, because we're gonna come calling why. What happened, we wanna know because DPI wants to know, because if they're at a school, they wanna know that for the funding purposes. Because they don't wanna have $7,000 go in two different directions. At all.
Okay.
Okay, so the auditors then are, this is part of testing the SIS system. This is when they're gonna be talking to teachers, the database administrator, staff person, probably the secretary of the office who might be changing the tardies to presents because the student arrived and got a late slip and then went to class. All the people involved in the SIS system, and they're doing that, they have to document everything they learn about your system, and then they actually have to test the system. They need to make sure that, and there's a plan laid out by DPI of all the requirements. There's like 3 pages of requirements for testing the SIS system. Again, not a choice of the auditors. They have to perform all these procedures, but they're testing to make sure that there's proper controls on your SIS system. So attendance records and enrollment records can't just be changed by anyone. There's a whole system in place at your school for how that happens. And I think for the most part, it's built into your SIS systems. There should be a lot of controls that you really don't even have any control over and can't override. So it should be not too much of a problem, other than they have to talk to everybody in your school that's using it and document all of that in their working papers.
Question, is there some place that defines what has to be tracked in the student information system? We have a new student information system this year for the school choice program, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be tracking in there.
There's, if you go to the DPI site with the Parent Choice Program, on the left column, one of the options is the WISE data link. You can go there and it will take you to the part that's going to explain all the SIS requirements, and there's a data elements page.
Sure, I've seen that.
Download there, and those are mandatory fields that your SIS system has to be able to track and then upload that information to the state.
Okay. And then I know it says attendance, but is that daily attendance or?
It is.
I mean, I don't know how it's supposed to be tracked.
It's
I've
daily attendance.
I've seen the,
At a minimum
the-
daily.
okay.
For
all right,
high schools and some grade schools with middle school.
Okay.
Change of classes, they take attendance typically every class.
so the classroom teacher is the person who's supposed to be going in there and touching the school information system? Okay,
For taking of the attendance.
Sure, for taking it.
Originating the attendance
Right.
records and adding grades and things like that. A lot of times the secretaries in the office are the ones that change them from tardy or from absent to tardy because they arrived late.
Let's stop there and just touch on that a minute with our panel, with the school leaders. How do you all handle the attendance piece? You both have high schools, along with Carlo, you have a grade school.
2 grade
Do you
schools.
do half day, full day? Attendance, how is that handled?
No, we do full, I mean, if they're present, they're there. If they have a medical excuse, we mark that. They're tardy, and then I think it goes to a certain point, if they're tardy and they don't show up, then of course it's an absence. So it's the front office, along with the teachers saying that they're not in the classroom, that, make the attendance what it is. But the front office will get calls, obviously, my child's not gonna be in today, or, so they can mark them first.
Similar, the
No.
classroom teachers mark attendance, but then the administrative assistants in the elementary office, middle school office, high school office, they are always reviewing it on a daily basis, and they do an end of day report.
Correct.
So that teachers can see that this child was marked absent 5th through 7th hour, and then a teacher can see that, oh wait, no, they were here.
Right, we'll send emails to our staff as well, to make sure that they're, following through with attendance. Attendance is a big important thing. And so you really have to, you can run a report out of many of your, like Power School, of who's not taking attendance at a certain time of the day. And unfortunately, it's just part of the job that they really have to take that attendance accurately. It just so helps for the counts. And it should be done as anyway, so.
Yeah, it should be monitored. It should be that the teachers are entering the original attendance, and then somebody's monitoring that
Right,
at a
yeah.
higher level of
Right.
permission, who can change from absent to tardy, or who can, do all the things that Kyle's talking about. I know in our system, I think sometime overnight, it finals off the last day, so that the next morning you can look at the report and see what you had, and then it's locked, it's set in stone, you're done.
No.
And it should be that way, because
Yeah.
you don't want anybody to go back and change it.
Okay.
So check for those controls. Usually there's levels of controls, and you have some leeway in setting them in your system. But I'm not sure, I'm not a database administrator, so I'm not sure exactly how much leeway or how that all works. I don't know if you, when you're looking at SIS systems, know anything more, can add anything?
So the biggest thing, and I think I like to look at all this program as big picture, what we're getting at. So the DPI is concerned about attendance because it proves the kid being there. And if a kid's there, then you get money for them. If you don't have the kid there, then they don't want to give you money for them. So the reality is they want to see a teacher putting the attendance in, and they don't want to see the principal ability changing it. Because the principal has the most initiative, or the head of the school, to have more kids. They have the most incentive. So that's why they want to, that's why they get into this IT system to look at who has the right to do what. And when it comes to attendance, they would love to see it that principals, head administrators are not touching that system, because that just encourages possible problems.
And there's actually a blurb in the bulletin about attendance that the choice administrator named in the paperwork is not the SIS database administrator. Should not be. It should be somebody else. Of course, if you don't have more people, then it may be, but it shouldn't be.
With a
because
small
that's-
school, how do you do that?
Then you do, and you try to put some kind of alternate process or procedure in place to mitigate the loss of control there. And that's a good question to ask of your auditors and ask of DPI. Look at that SIS, the WISE data bulletin, and see how you can work around that effectively. But yeah, that's kind of critical, because obviously the person, as I said, who's in charge of the school has a lot to gain by having more students and more money. So you have to be careful that that line is not crossed. Okay.
One thing too, I don't know if Ed's firm handles it this way too, but try not to have present as the default, because there's more chance for error of a teacher. If there's a kid on their roster that never shows up, if they never have to go in and click a box or change an A to a P for a kid, that kid could just be on their class roster the entire year and be included in the count when the kid never showed up. So try not to have the default set to present.
And we actually ran into that with the summer school in our SIS system, because, and if you didn't have, well, the one school that is online that had summer school, or two, because we got paid prorated for this last summer, we got paid for any days that a student attended. So it used to be that they had to they were required to attend 15 days in order to get any payment for summer school. Now it's however, 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, or 15 or more, you get payment. So we couldn't remove the students who had attended. We would have in the past removed them because they had basically unenrolled from summer school when they stopped attending after 5 days and they didn't show up for 2 weeks afterwards. We would take them out and they didn't show up on our reports. And we take them out so the teachers can't accidentally mark them present when they're actually not there. But we couldn't do that. So it got a little fuzzy because we were taking out students that we could have actually claimed payment for. So we actually missed getting payment for a handful of students because it was so much work to put them back. So be aware of that too.
What do you do if your SIS doesn't give you that option to default to absent instead of present?
If you could repeat the question?
What do you do if your SIS doesn't give you the option to default it to absent, so you have to mark them present? Like ours, you just hit the button submit if they're all present, or you check
And
the
they
box
show
if
up-
they're absent.
And they show up blank in the report. And that's how our school is. We're stuck with it.
So you don't really.
I
it's
don't
just what
know
it
if
is.
they can
Okay.
reprogram it. You can talk to your SIS vendor, find out if there's an option to do it.
Okay.
Some of them have it. I don't know why ours actually doesn't, but,
Yeah, they only have to mark, if they're absent.
Yeah, that's how ours is.
and I don't know if that's an option.
I don't know, it's something to talk to Mike about and
It
have it
is.
on here because.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you know, as a past teacher, I'm guilty, terrible, awful. I was a high school teacher and there were days I got busy and oh my God, I didn't take attendance first hour. And now I'm sitting there guessing, fifth hour, like, gosh, I think he was here. I thought he was there. So it's imperative of you as leaders of your school or to get on your principal or whoever it is to say, hey, I don't care how you do it, maybe the first second you walk in, take that attendance. Because now that we're in the choice program and they're watching every kid and watching every dollar, it's a big deal. And like I said, I was terrible. So I can say that because I don't teach anymore.
But yeah, that can make the difference between you getting the voucher payment, half a year's voucher payment or not. So it is very critical. Let's see. So we're talking about the SIS system, but
Lori, I just have another question following up on that last statement with the attendance and you're getting paid. Unlike summer school, where you alluded to summer school, you're getting paid a prorated voucher amount for the summer based on the actual days of attendance of the child versus throughout the school year,
it's the count date.
you
There.
either get a semester or you don't get a semester.
For the September count date, if you go back to the first slide, DPI certified the payments you're gonna get for the September and November voucher dates. And that is all based on one count date. So they're there or they're there or they're there 1 day before and 1 day after, you'll get the
Okay.
money. Any 1 day before and any 1 day after, not just the day before.
So
and
what
just
if
after.
they're sick?
No.
No,
That would be terrible.
but I'll talk in a
You
minute
are
about
not
it.
gonna be sick.
Well, let's talk about it now. We've had, there are more than you would think instances of students being claimed at more than one school. So if they're there on the count date and another school says they were there on the count date, you've got a little battle on your hands, because if neither one of those schools backs down, DPI won't pay either school,
It won't be either one.
right?
Correct.
Nobody will get any money.
And then you have to wait for the audit.
So as far as the count date, great idea, sort of a great idea to have, feed them pizza and have them show up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you kind of wonder, I always kind of wondered,
Seriously,
is it a
I
great
paid for it.
idea? Because shouldn't they just be coming to school anyways? But
No.
also, what we do is actually, the teachers all keep assignments or homework or something that the students did on that day to prove that they were actually there.
Right, we try to.
And the day before and the day after.
Correct, and we try to call it just bell work, non-gradable something, you
Something
know.
that they had to
hear.
do, sign their name on,
Of course, you
date it.
know, if they have a test or whatever, then they're gonna mark in the grade book, and so the auditors as well can go in and see that there was legitimately work done in this class, and, you know, all the classes as they go through the course of the day. The hardest part is K4 and K5. We really try to ask for more work for them. So just to show that, hey, these little kids were coloring and try to put their
something
name
more
on it, you know, and help them, you know, so just so those are hard, but obviously with the grade books and things like that, you know, the auditors can look and see that there are assignments given. Right,
Just to
I know,
clarify,
we try everything, but.
just to
Sorry.
clarify what you said about the day before and day after. September 21st is the count date. The day if the child is sick the 21st, then we should have on the 20th and the following Monday that they're present with some substantiated work that shows that they were present on those 2 days.
Oh, or any one day leading up to September 21st and any day after September. It doesn't have to be the day before and the day after. It can be
If-
any day before.
If they're ill, the day of
Any
the
day
count,
after.
and we want to make sure they're counted as
Yes,
present or
yes.
enrolled, I should say.
So of course, you've got a count report. It's due October 1st.
Wow. I think it's changed to October 1st. Okay.
So
Assume 10
you've got to
10.
submit it in the OAS system by the 1st. So if, for instance, they're absent on the 21st, but they were there all the days before, and they do not show up before you have to file the report, you wouldn't count them. However, when the auditors come for the January count and find that they did arrive after that, you'll be able to add them later in the year for the end of the year.
So key is the teachers, we need to make sure that there's some sort of evidential work that they were physically in the room in some way.
It's
It's rare.
I mean,
It's
a couple, I mean,
it's rare that it ever gets to
Louder,
that.
please.
It's rare that it ever gets
no,
to that
but
level.
when it gets to that stage, that's your only chance of actually getting the money.
I know.
And we know this because it happened to us 2 years in a row. And we got the money
We
after
had
a
to-
long drawn out.
Are you talking about when another school counted? Correct, yeah.
well, I'm just talking about just
You're just
So-
practical in the
talking about-
classroom.
We have all years, you know, and we didn't talk about this at our school this year, but we have asked the teachers to have some legitimate work. Because it'll be that one kid who's gone 3 days and they say, well, you know, show me something, you know, from this and, you know,
Yeah,
so.
okay, all right.
It's kind of a hassle for the
No, well,
teachers.
it doesn't have
We
to be if
keep
it's
it
planned
through
for.
the audit, but.
It's an added
It's
piece
a-
that they're
Yeah.
saying
Well,
here. We've never had
it's
to
an
do that.
added protection.
We've just shown evidence through our SIS that the student was there at least one day before and at least one day after through attendance on the SIS. That normally just
That normally
settles
takes care of
that.
it.
They're just mentioning here about having
Sort of a little
evidentiary
backup.
work in the classroom as a backup if you
Got
want.
it.
Right, if you want to, so we're thinking of.
Just think about your
Well, no, I think
population,
it's-
think about your
it's
population
wise.
of students and
Yeah.
if you're working with, if students are coming to your school for the first time and they're new and you don't know them, maybe you need to
Because
do that, but
we've attracted a lot of new students as a result of this program.
so you don't know
it's-
if you're working with the students that have been at your school long and they've just gotten into the choice program, you know your students, so
Yeah.
you can
this is
decide what you think is best.
new, so.
But I'd hate to
But I
see
like
a
the
school
backup.
with 20 choice students miss out on 1 or 2 payments because another school claimed them and you
Yeah, all right,
couldn't
well,
prove
would-
that they were there.
Okay.
Deanna online says that they scheduled their picture day the same day as count day.
Oh.
That's a creative idea.
That is clever.
Yeah, but I would assume you'd wanna be extra careful though, that they're actually in the classroom that's getting the attendance marked. Would that be accurate?
It would be. Our difficult time, I mean, our September 3rd count, Friday count is not so bad. It's the second Friday in January
January.
due to Christmas
Vacations.
vacation. We have students who, you know, we have a Hispanic population, they may go to Mexico, they're not coming back by the count in sometimes. So you're really waiting for them to return, you know, before you do or they don't show up and you're trying to track them down and are you coming back? So or there's a big snowstorm.
Yeah.
You know, and kids aren't coming to school because of this or that and this. So that is our harder count, the second
good-
Friday
good advice.
Yeah.
in January, I would say.
And that brings up a great point. How do you handle if it's snowy on count day?
Well,
DPI.
There was
There was
a,
a
there was a
count,
year
and
where most schools were closed on the count dates.
well, I called BPI because I remember this and I said, hey, what if we close down everybody? No, that's not gonna happen. Sure enough, it happened
It
that
actually
year.
happened one year.
And so, you know, they moved the count.
They did.
They
They sent out a memo and
Which
allowed
is
schools to
rare.
count. Let's say if it was
Day.
if it was a Friday, maybe the Monday or something. Yeah.
So it's rare,
No.
Because it would have been so much work for both.
rare but
It would
true.
have been so much work for the DPI and all the schools.
It would have been so much work for everybody,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
schools,
And
the
we were
auditors,
closed
DPI too.
down.
Because it
Yeah.
all would have had to been reported as one day before and one day after.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And to go and go more into that one day before and after, there's a required inquiry by your auditor. So don't be surprised if you get asked that of, you know, if you're aware of any kids absent on the count date. If you're aware of them being enrolled in another school. So it's always, I'm assuming most schools have a policy of getting like slips from parents or try to get slips from parents, like doctor's excuses or, hey, my kid was sick, we were on vacation. All that stuff goes and helps to support your case as well.
One more thing to add too, just so you know, if you do have a child that's out for like an extended period of time, let's say a month or two, they would actually get added in that fall count because your auditor isn't going to be in the door on September 22nd. Okay, your auditor isn't going to be in the door till sometime after mid-October because the reports aren't even out yet. Right. So when the auditor gets there, and he has until December 15th when it's actually issued to add them into your count. So if they're gone for like 2 months because they're at the hospital because they got in a car accident and hopefully they're all okay, just track them all the way till the end, and the auditor at the end can add them in so that you'll get paid up for that child.
So, like, in our situation, most of our families happen to email us, you know, why their student is gone. Would you want that in the choice folder or in their personal folder? Because right now I put it in their personal folder.
Honestly, as an auditor, I wouldn't even care why
You
they're
don't?
gone. I
Okay.
only care if they're ever there a day after and ever
Okay.
there a day before.
Okay.
How they track.
No, they kind of got rid of that. They just will ask us to ask, you know, if they're aware of being enrolled in another school or district.
Since there's so much talk about like people being enrolled in different schools, well, just circumstances where it's happened a number of times, is it most of the time accidental, or is it an intentional? One school is typically trying to fraud the system.
As far as I know, it's accidental. They had a student at their school or they had them enroll. Because remember, in the online application system, parents can enroll at
At multiple
however
schools,
many schools
right?
they would like to. And they may have turned their paperwork in and been verified at a number of schools because they weren't sure where they were gonna go or where they were gonna get a seat. So it's accidental. They're just in the OAS system and they, you know, they're checking off the boxes of who's there for their count report and they just accidentally check the wrong box.
I think it's more prevalent in Milwaukee where the mobility
there's
rate is
so
so
much- and
high. And
there's-
so you have families making decisions at the very, very last minute to change from
Okay.
one school 3 blocks away from another school. Whereas in the outstate program, it's less likely that they're going to be switching from school to school.
And I can add to that, we have had, you know, that happen to us. Of course, you give all the information, the school has this other school. We give attendance work even in this other school. I don't know how they could have had attendance work though, because the child was literally at our school. Through the parent, what possible school this was, and so in some case, the DPI will not tell you the school.
They won't
So-
tell you the other school.
So because, and we did reach out to the school and they were like, oh, you know, we made a mistake. So we got some things corrected, but some things we had to wait till literally after that audit. Yeah. And then we got the certification from the first one and then we could appeal.
Okay, so you can only, oh, let's see, where are we? Okay, so we went through all of this. They're gonna test your system. They're checking your school calendar to see that you held school on the count date. Now, they're gonna do a whole lot of ticking and time. They're gonna be testing your attendance records against your applications, against your, they're gonna be checking your enrollment, your attendance records, literally against your count report to make sure that everybody was there as you reported, either one day before or one day after or on the count date. Asking you a whole bunch more questions about anything that comes up with that testing, because in the end, they want to make sure that you get paid for everybody you're entitled to. So you might be adding students, as Ed said, and you can add them all the way up to the date the report is filed. So your auditors are trying to make sure that everything's in order and make sure you get all the payments you're entitled to. We're not doing the official, lob that one off. We're not doing that official testing anymore. And then when they're done doing all of that with your records, they're going to be testing the application. So now they've come to the place where they have decided through your records who should be reported on the count report, and they may have been or they may have to add them. And then they're going to take all of those people and test their applications to make sure you have all the proper documentation that you need to actually also get that money. So you're not done yet. Once you get through the attendance process, they have to check all the documentation for the applications. So I'm sure you've all been taking applications for a while now and have run into some sticky situations with documentation. And the best advice that we all can give you is if you have a question and it's not in the bulletin, it's not in the list of acceptable items for documentation for income or for residency, contact DPI and ask them what you can get instead and just work with that family to get it. If DPI tells you something to get and you do it, print that out, the response from DPI, get it in an email, print it out, put it in the student's file so that it's with the application, so it's there when the auditors come looking and the auditors can see that you did exactly what DPI told you should do.
I had an interesting thing happen last year with our audit, first time in all the years of being audited, same auditor. He was checking the residency documentation, and for 3 families, he required me to secure a new residency documentation from the family because the one that the family turned in, the parent name, let's say on the utility bill, was slightly different than the parent name when they went into OAS and or online and applied. And the example was, on the parent application online, it was Anthony, and on his utility bill, it was Tony. Yep. And I was really surprised. That has never happened before. And there was 2 others similar where the parent name on the residency, the utility bill, the W-2, whatever, wasn't exactly that name. Not the middle initial. He didn't fret about the middle initial.
Right. I know.
But I was really surprised by that because that had not happened before.
Yeah, we have
That is true. All the documentation, the
So
name
so
spellings
the
of the
student,
parents.
the application wasn't rejected. We just have to go to the parent and say, we need a new residency documentation that lines up with your name.
Thankfully, you can correct it. You can do that.
Or
And
at
the
the
parents
time
can
when
correct
you
it
have
in
a
advance.
discrepancy like that.
At that point, they cannot.
If it's not verified, they can, correct?
If it's not verified, they can. But once it's been verified
Then they can.
and the auditors are there, it's hopefully already been verified. It's too late for them to change
Gotcha.
it. Right. So then you have to get new documentation, but they have to match exactly residency and income. So when remember we talked earlier about application reviewers versus application processors. Your application reviewers would be the ones typically looking for those things just to do all the fine checks to make sure that everything's in agreement before you verify those applications. And some will slip by, but thankfully they can be corrected. So if your auditors catch it, you'll be able to get, if it's a financial income mistake, it might be too late. So that's why it's critical to have your reviewers going through everything and making sure it all agrees.
One big thing, and this is because you're probably like, why does it matter if the name's a little different? Why does it matter if there's a dash? Why does it matter if there's a little hyphen on a name? The reason why DPI is doing that, even though it's a pain, I don't like it. I guarantee Riley hates it too. And you probably hate it. But the reason they do that is they're trying to match kids. So they put it in a big database and the computer system matches it up. And if Ashley shows up at 2 schools with the exact same name and same address, that's how they know, uh-oh, there's a problem. So that's what they're doing, and that's why it has to be exact, and that's why it's crazy ridiculous. And a hyphen anything, we're gonna ask, and we're gonna wonder what's the difference and what's right. Because you might call your kid Joe with an A on the end or something, and in reality his birth certificate is just with an E. So it's gonna be by the record of the birth certificate, and that's why we're gonna check it.
Kind of add on to that, it's more important for the students, and it's more prevalent in the Hispanic community to have dashes or multiple last names with a space or not a dash. And if the attendance records don't agree to what's in OAS, then that's where we have to dig further. And in the past, it used to be immunization records or the birth certificate or the school administrator filling out the annotation of birth. Now they're just going with the annotation of birth of the birth certificate.
I mean, we don't get a birth certificate in high school.
Right, birth certificates are not required
No.
in the application process.
But they found through the
Well,
immunization
it's
records,
first.
some of them don't put the dashes in there. So that's why
Right.
at the last,
I'm just saying documentation of a choice student, you don't have to document immunization record or birth certificate. That's up to the school. You just have to use the name given on their electronic application and on their proof of residency. So just when your administrative assistants put students into your SIS, new students, just encourage them that they put that student name in there the way the parent listed it on the electronic application to DPI. Because you're not required to collect a birth certificate, or
Other than
you are required to do
K4, K5, and first grade.
It's,
They're
although I
gonna want
question that.
We do ask
They-
for birth certificate.
Right, we
Elementary.
actually do for K4 through first, but DPI has told me it's not required. They said it's up to the school to determine whether or not the student is the correct age. So we decided to use birth certificates. I'm just saying, your auditor won't be necessarily wanting you to have a birth certificate for every child.
No, they'll only be
No,
looking for
no.
something if there's a discrepancy
Right.
between OAS
Right.
and your SIS.
Or with
So
the
what the
name.
parent entered on their electronic application, make sure your administrative assistant is putting that new student into your SIS spelled the way the parent did originally. Then you won't have an issue.
And this is only an issue if you have one of these instances that Jason was mentioning where there's a discrepancy.
Right.
So in 95% of your cases or more, it's not needed. It's only in these cases where there's a discrepancy and the parent maybe uses a second last name sometimes, not others. They hyphenate it sometimes they don't. Those are the weird situations.
So to reiterate, for the school's review of application process, somebody should be checking that OAS agrees to your SIS system. And then the auditors would never question anything. Right. It won't be an issue at all. And that just removes that from ever being a problem.
Yeah, at the WISE data training that I attended, the DPI said that before you get a WISE ID for the student, it's important to have full first, middle, and last name, because then you're good to go. Or if you don't have a middle name or you just have the middle initial, you're not as likely to get the correct WISE ID. And it's a lot harder to change that afterwards. So.
Better identifier.
Right.
Okay.
That kid versus somebody else who entered it.
Okay, we need to finish
Okay, great.
up.
So let's just quickly say that the auditors are gonna test at minimum 125 applications. So if you have less than that, they'll be testing every application. If you have more than that, they'll be doing a sample, and the samples are provided by DPI. So they can't do that testing until they get the samples from DPI, which I don't know when you're getting it these days, but it used to be kind of late in the game.
Mid-October, late October.
Okay, so if you have more than 125 choice students in your school, they won't be testing your applications till after they get the samples from DPI in all likelihood. Let's see.
Summer school?
Summer school, the summer school head count, if you held summer school, the auditors will be testing that, and they'll be looking at the your documentation of what you provided with instruction, your classes, your teaching staff, all your summer school attendance records, examples of your typical class schedule that you had, looking at your summer school payroll records to verify who got paid for teaching summer school, because they need to determine if any of your classes were taught by Title I teachers, because those are not eligible for choice funding. And then they're gonna ensure that you met all the minimum requirements. They're also gonna be preparing a memo about that. And then they're gonna check your attendance records to verify that your summer school pupil count report was filed correctly, basically mathematically. And then they will give you, when they finally finished all of this, they will give you the representation letter to basically print on letterhead and sign, read, obviously read before you sign it. And there's just, if you look, you'll see it on their letter. It's just a long list of assertions. It's about more than a page long at this point.
And it's actually, DPI provides us that one, it's on, in the audit guide, if you go on the DPI's website, it's like the last couple pages of the enrollment audit guide available on the website.
If you're bored and you'd like to read it ahead of time, feel free to go there. But otherwise, the auditors will give it to you and you can read it then. It's not heavy reading. It's basically, like I said, you told them the truth and you answered all their questions and gave them all the information that they asked of you. So, does anybody on the panel have anything to add?
I'd like to add something. When your auditor comes, they ask for your enrollment applications by grade level. Is that true? What you typically? That's our auditors. He asked for them by grade level. Well, if a family has kids in 3 different grade levels, what do you do? And so something that my administrative assistant does is she does a file for each grade level. So this is an example of 2nd grade. And when you open it up, this very first student, her application is with a sibling. So we file the application with the oldest sibling, and for the youngest one, we just put their name and where the auditor can find that application. So then as he's flipping through 2nd grade, he's hitting everyone. And then if they aren't somebody with a sibling, there's the application right there. So that's how,
Good idea.
Well, you can buy applications, technically, if it's more.
I used
so
to
these
live-
individuals are saying they don't make that requirement. Maybe my auditor is unique, but
Well, when I was auditing, I used to, if I found an application, it would have the names on it, and I would just go and find them in my enrollment list and check them off, so I didn't have to go
Or
back.
two, I mean, they could also sort the OAS dump alphabetically by student's last name, and if they have the same last name, they'd all show up and enroll in that person.
What that does is saves audit time.
It does, but there's other ways the auditors can,
But I mean, I like that idea.
yeah, there's other ways the
Let's
auditors
keep
can
the
carve
costs
the
down.
information to
The
shave
meters
off
run.
time. Does anybody have any other
I'm sorry,
questions?
more money for pizza.
One thing to add on that, and I don't know how big all your schools are, but remember, it's a minimum of 120. So if you have over 120 choice kids, only 120 apps will be checked. And that's a very important discrepancy, because you might say, how come he's tested more than 120 kids, or she? It's because it's tested by app. And in addition, if I was you, knowing what I know, and it was coming up to choice date and I have over 120, if I don't have all 120, they're all getting checked. Okay? So you might as well get them all out. If they're over 120, I'd be asking my auditor, give me who you're gonna check. Because they will know. On the OAS system, it's a count number, it's a randomly organized number, and they can literally take a screenshot of it for you and send it to you and say, here's who I'm checking. Okay, but like I said, if you're under 120, you might as well get them all out because they're all getting looked at.
And we're required to, if we find one variance, to go to another sample as well.
Right.
But they're all here in the
Yeah.
Lori, what about the SNSP program? Is there anyone in the room who is a participant in the special needs scholarship program? Anyone online with SNSP? Because that might have slightly different rules. Yes to SNSP online, one of the people. So Dan, are you our SNSP person, what do they need to know?
Do we have to audit all, do you have to audit all the applications for SNSP, or is it a sample?
Well, DPI will give us like a list of who we need to audit. At least so far, we've had to do everyone since they haven't done that many people in the program. Especially in your first year, you would probably have to audit everyone. Going forward, like next year, you don't have to do everyone, and DPI will send you the list. Generally, once you get into the program, I believe,
You just have to renew your IEPs.
yeah, and you don't have to worry about those. You'll still have to check like the residency documentation and that other stuff. Yeah, but for the IEPs, you don't have to worry about that, at least for a couple of years.
Okay, so did you hear, for the bulk of the app,
Walk left. You could walk left so they could see Dan. Awesome, thank you.
okay,